I had just broken up with my boyfriend, and it was time to start fresh. I decided to move to the city, leaving behind my old life and secrets in the village. My first step was to find a job. So I sent out my resume and began to wait. I didn't know what would come of it, but I hoped for the best. One evening, I received a message from a woman named Wanda. She said she was looking for a housekeeper. I was thrilled, but also a bit nervous since I'd be moving to the big city all on my own. In our messages, Wanda and I agreed to meet, and she told me to wait for her in the park. On the appointed day, I sat on a bench, watching the people passing by with curiosity. They all looked so stylish, busy, and serious. After a while, I saw a large, gleaming black car drive into the park. My eyes widened as it stopped right in front of me. A tall woman with flawless hair and immaculate, expensive clothes stepped out. It was Wanda. She smiled at me and invited me to get into the car. I got into the car, trying to stay calm, but inside I felt a surge of excitement. The seats were soft, and the car smelled wonderful. As we drove, I couldn't stop looking out the window. The buildings were towering, and the streets were bustling with people and cars. Everything looked so vibrant and beautiful. Wanda told me we were heading to her boyfriend Sam's house. As we approached, my heart began to race again. The house was enormous, with large windows and tall gates. Wanda led me inside, where we met Sam. He was tall, with broad shoulders and strong arms. His face was serious, and he was so strikingly handsome that I couldn't stop staring at him. I felt my cheeks warm, and my heart began to beat even faster. At first, Sam didn't say a word. He just stood there, looking at me. His gaze was so intent that it felt as if he could see right through me. I quickly looked away, feeling awkward. But inside, I couldn't help thinking how lucky I was to work in such a beautiful home, and for such a handsome man. I stood there wondering what would happen next, and if Sam would like me. All I knew in that moment was that my life was about to change. Wanda led me up the stairs, and my heart pounded louder with each step. The house was enormous. When we reached the room, Wanda opened the door. "This will be your room," she said, smiling. The room was small but clean and cozy, with a soft bed in the corner and a window overlooking the road. I hesitated for a moment in the doorway, taking it all in. This would be my new home. I was thrilled, and my hands trembled slightly. "Make yourself at home," Wanda said before leaving. I sat on the bed. It was much more comfortable than anything I'd ever slept on. But my excitement quickly turned into worry. Would I be able to do all the work Wanda needed? Would Sam mind if I stayed here? In the evening, I sat in my room, unpacking my small bag. The house was so quiet that I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall, but suddenly the silence was broken by loud voices. I froze and listened, my hand still holding the dress. Sam was speaking loudly. "Why did you bring someone into the house? We don't need help." His voice was filled with anger. My heart started racing again. I knew they were talking about me. I crept closer to the door and heard Wanda's distressed voice. "Sam, I have too much work. I can't handle everything on my own. We need help with cleaning and cooking." Their argument grew louder. A tight knot of fear twisted in my stomach. What if Sam told me to leave? I had nowhere to go, and I couldn't go back to the village. The city was big and intimidating, and I didn't know anyone here except Wanda and Sam. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to hold back tears. Meanwhile, the argument raged on, and I could hear the frustration in Sam's voice. "This is my house, Wanda. You should have asked me first, not dumped some stranger on me out of nowhere." I lay on the bed, pulling my knees to my chest, my heart pounding. I felt so small in this huge house. I prayed they would stop arguing soon. I didn't want to be kicked out before I had a chance to prove myself. Finally, the voices quieted and silence settled in. I wasn't sure if it was a good sign or a bad one, but I lay there, too afraid to move. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I could only hope they wouldn't throw me out onto the street. I lay there, hugging my knees, waiting for the argument to resume or for the door to open and someone to tell me to leave. But instead, I heard something completely unexpected. In the stillness, a loud kiss echoed, followed by not shouts, but a passionate whisper. My eyes widened in surprise. I never expected to hear something like that. The kiss was long, and I could hear the smacking sound of their lips, making my cheeks burn with embarrassment. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying not to listen, but the sound was impossible to ignore. It felt as if they were kissing right behind my door. The atmosphere in the house shifted, as if all the frustration and discontent had vanished in an instant. I sat on the bed, confused, not knowing what to feel. Part of me felt relieved that they had stopped arguing, but another part of me felt strange hearing such an intimate moment. After that, exhausted from the tension, I fell asleep. Several weeks passed, but life in Sam's house remained tense. Wanda was kind to me, always asking if I needed anything and making sure I was comfortable. Sometimes she brought me small gifts like treats or new clothes. But Sam was different. He barely spoke to me, as if I wasn't even there. His serious expression never softened when he looked at me, and I often felt like I was invisible to him. The house was always filled with their arguments. It seemed like every week they fought about something, sometimes something small, sometimes something big. Wanda would raise her voice, trying to explain her side, while Sam's deep, angry voice filled the house. I could hear their angry footsteps as they rushed from room to room, doors slamming behind them. But no matter how intense their fights were, they always ended the same way: a loud kiss and sex. Sometimes, hearing their arguments, I would sneak a glance into the hallway. I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but my curiosity got the best of me, and every time I saw the same thing. Sam would pull Wanda toward him, and then they would kiss, making all the tension disappear in a matter of seconds. The kisses were so loud, as if they didn't care who heard. It felt like I was watching a scene from a romance novel. But deep down, I couldn't understand why they fought so fiercely if they loved each other so much. One evening, as I was cleaning the kitchen, I heard another argument. I wiped my hands and looked out the kitchen window. My heart stopped when I saw Wanda running out of the house, dragging a suitcase behind her. Her face was twisted in anger, but she didn't even look back. I watched in shock as she walked away. When the front door slammed shut, everything suddenly went quiet. I tiptoed into the living room and saw Sam sitting on the couch, looking angry. My heart was racing in my chest. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, feeling small and scared. Sam looked up at me and said, "Pack your things and make sure you're gone by tomorrow morning." Tears welled up in my eyes. I had nowhere to go, and everything that was happening felt like a nightmare. I couldn't bring myself to say anything or ask to stay. His gaze was so cold and indifferent. In that moment, he suddenly stood up and left the house, slamming the door behind him. Then I heard the sound of the car driving away. I stood in the silence, unable to move. A few hours later, I heard the sound of the car again. Sam had returned. The door opened, and I peeked out from the room. Sam was standing in the middle of the living room, clearly drunk, swaying as he barely managed to keep his balance. He mumbled something under his breath before stumbling into the bathroom. I kept listening to the sounds coming from the bathroom, and when I heard a crash, I rushed in. I pushed the door open sharply and saw Sam lying on the floor. He was completely naked, and his clothes were scattered around the bathroom. His strong, powerful body looked so helpless in that moment. I froze, not knowing what to do. I had never seen him like this before. His nudity made me feel incredibly awkward. He had always been so serious and confident, but now he clearly needed help. I sighed and stepped closer to him. "Sam," I said quietly, gently touching his shoulder, but he didn't respond. He just lay there, looking lost. My heart raced as I grabbed a towel from the rack and wiped the water from his skin. My hands trembled as I pulled a shirt over him, then carefully helped him into his pants. He was so drunk that he could barely sit up on his side for a few minutes. I helped him get up and walk to the couch. I covered him with a blanket and sat for a while, watching Sam sleep. The new feeling began to stir inside me, a tenderness for this man I had once feared. In the morning, I cautiously descended the stairs into the living room and saw Sam sitting on the couch with a serious expression on his face. I wasn't sure if he remembered what had happened the day before. When he saw me, he nodded. I swallowed hard and greeted him. "Good morning, Sam." "Good morning. What happened yesterday?" "My head is killing me," he said. I hesitated, then replied, "I found you on the floor in the bathroom. You must have slipped and hit your head. I helped you up and got you onto the couch." It was clear that he was embarrassed by my story. "Thank you for your help," he said, turning away. I quickly went back to my room, my hands trembling as I gathered my things. A deep sadness filled my chest. I didn't want to leave, but I knew I had no choice. When I finished packing, I went downstairs. Sam was still in the living room. "I'm leaving," I said quietly, not wanting to look at him. He nodded without saying a word, and I made my way to the door. Tears welled up in my eyes as I walked away. But as soon as I reached the gate, I heard Sam's voice. "Wait, please stay. I can't be alone right now." I stood there, feeling stunned, as Sam approached, took my bag, and led me back into the house. I followed him, still trying to process what had just happened. In the living room, I noticed how sad he looked, and there were tears in his eyes. "Why are you crying?" I asked quietly. At first, he didn't want to answer, looking away and wiping his eyes, but then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I had a big argument with Wanda. She left, and now I don't know if she'll ever come back," he said, looking so sad that it made my heart ache for him. "I love her," he continued, his voice trembling, "but I don't know if she feels the same way, and I don't know what to do now." He sat on the couch, his hands covering his head in despair. I sat down next to him, my heart aching for Sam. I touched him gently, trying to offer some comfort. After a while, Sam finally stood up and said, "I need to go to work." I was still shaken by everything that had happened, but also relieved that Sam had allowed me to stay. One evening, when Sam returned from work, I went to his room to tell him dinner was ready. But when I walked in, I saw him sitting on the bed, tears streaming down his face. "Is this about Wanda?" I asked him. He only nodded silently in response. My heart ached for him, and I couldn't just leave. I sat down beside him on the bed and took his hand. Unexpectedly, he hugged me, still crying. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there, hoping that my presence would offer him some comfort. When I opened my eyes, I realized I was still in Sam's bed. It seemed that neither of us had noticed when we both fell asleep. My eyes widened in surprise and embarrassment. I tried to get up quickly, but the door suddenly swung open. Standing in the doorway was Wanda. She looked at us, her face turning red with fury. "What is going on here?" she screamed. I froze, too scared to move or say anything. Wanda approached the bed and roughly grabbed my arm. "I'm leaving for a few days, and you little tramp, are in my man's bed," she spat. "Wanda, wait, it's not what you think," I whispered faintly, but she didn't listen. She pulled me out of the bed and started dragging me toward the door, calling me names, and my head started to spin. I felt so guilty, I didn't know what to say. "You're a snake. Pack your things and get out of here immediately," Her words hit me hard, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Wanda stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there. Feeling lost, I began to gather my things with trembling hands, tears blurring my vision. I didn't want to leave, but I had no choice. Just as I stepped out of my room, Wanda grabbed my arm again and dragged me toward the stairs. At that moment, Sam rushed towards us. "Stop, Wanda! How could you let her stay in our bed?" Sam sighed. "Wanda, nothing happened. She was just trying to help me. Please, you have to believe me. Let her go." Wanda's eyes filled with tears. "I don't believe you." She pulled me by the hand again, and just as Sam tried to separate us, Wanda, in her fury, shoved him away. I watched in horror as Sam lost his balance and fell down the stairs. "Sam!" I screamed, my voice trembling with fear. Wanda froze, her anger instantly replaced by fear. We both rushed down the stairs. Sam was lying there, and his face showed an expression of pain. "I can't feel my legs," he said hoarsely. "I think I broke my spine." I froze, not knowing what to do. Wanda's face went pale. "We need to call 911, she said with a trembling voice. Tears streamed down my cheeks as they carried Sam out of the house on a stretcher, so helpless. At the hospital, several hours passed before the doctor finally came out to see us. My heart pounded wildly as the doctor looked at us and shook his head. "Sam has broken his spine," the doctor said. "But the good news is that this is one of those cases where recovery is possible. No one knows when or if it will happen, but there is a chance. The most important thing is to stay hopeful. However, he will need to stay in bed for a long time." I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Sam, the confident and strong man, was suddenly reduced to helplessness. In that moment, Wanda whispered, "I can't live like this. Tell him. I just can't." After those words, she turned and left the hospital without even saying goodbye to Sam. When I entered his hospital ward, he asked where Wanda was. I told him she had left. His eyes were filled with sorrow, but he didn't say anything. I could see that his heart was completely broken. I couldn't leave Sam like this, especially when he was in pain and so alone, so I stayed by his side in the hospital. I made sure he was comfortable, helped him with his meals, and spoke with the doctors about how he could recover. When I brought him food, he smiled and thanked me. But behind those smiles, I could still see the sadness in his eyes from Wanda's departure. He missed her, and it broke my heart to see him like that. Finally, the doctors allowed him to be discharged from the hospital. At home, I continued to take care of Sam and help him recover from his injury. He couldn't do anything on his own. I cleaned, cooked, helped him bathe, and dressed him. One day, as I was covering him with a blanket, Sam quietly said, "You've been so kind to me. I don't know what I would have done without you." I looked at him, confused. "I'm just happy to help," I replied. I became more and more attached to Sam, but I knew he was still thinking about Wanda. Every time I saw the sadness in his eyes, I reminded myself that I was just helping him through a tough time, and I wasn't the one he truly wanted. Days passed, and Sam began to recover. He could even walk for short periods. Wanda never returned, nor did she call to check on Sam. Gradually, the sadness in the house started to fade, and things began to feel normal again. We laughed more, and the tension in the air lifted. I knew that staying to help Sam was the right choice, but deep down, I couldn't help wondering about the future. Over time, Sam and I started talking more. We discussed everything: his work, my life in the village, and how much had changed. But there was one thing I couldn't bring myself to tell him. In the village, I had a daughter, and I wasn't sure how to tell Sam. I feared that it might change the way he saw me. So, I kept it a secret, even though I thought about it constantly and missed my little girl terribly. One evening, as we sat on the couch talking and laughing, something incredible happened. Sam suddenly leaned in and kissed me. It was a soft and sweet kiss, and everything inside me fluttered. At first, I was taken by surprise and didn't know how to react, but then I smiled at him, and he smiled back. After that kiss, everything between us changed. Sam asked me out on a date, and I couldn't believe it. I felt so happy and nervous at the same time. We went to a beautiful restaurant with twinkling lights and soft music playing in the background. He told me stories that made me laugh so much, and it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Everything felt like a dream, but the weight of my secret still hung over me. How much longer could I keep it? How would I tell him? How would he react? Days passed, and I was so happy with Sam. We were getting closer, spending more and more time together, sometimes cuddling on the couch, exchanging tender kisses, and talking for hours. It felt so nice to be near him, to feel loved, but deep down, I knew that what I was hiding could destroy everything. With each passing day, it became harder to keep the secret. But I didn't want to lose what we had. Months passed, and one day something magical happened. Sam got down on one knee and asked me to be his wife. I couldn't believe it. I felt like the happiest person alive, and my heart was racing. I immediately said yes, because I had already fallen so deeply in love with him. We embraced tightly, but as I held him, I felt a wave of unease. I still hadn't told Sam about my daughter. The days after the proposal were filled with excitement, but also fear. What if he leaves me when he finds out my secret? It was impossible to keep it hidden forever, especially since Sam wanted to meet my family in the village. I was scared, but I had no choice. I called my mom and explained the situation, telling her everything about how I had kept my daughter a secret from Sam. My mom was understanding, and I asked her to help me present my daughter as my younger sister. I just wasn't ready to tell the truth yet. After a long pause, she agreed, promising that everything would go smoothly. When the day to visit the village arrived, my heart wouldn't stop racing. I held Sam's hand tightly as we walked to my family's house. When we entered, my mom greeted us with a wide smile. My daughter walked up to us and said, "Hello, I'm Samantha, Emma's younger sister." Sam smiled and shook her hand. I let out a sigh of relief. The rest of the visit passed in a blur, but my family and daughter played their roles perfectly, and everything seemed to go smoothly. We ate, laughed, and shared stories as if everything was normal. But inside, I couldn't shake the anxiety of lying to Sam. When we were alone, the weight of my secret felt heavier than ever. I knew I had to tell him, but fear gripped my heart. What if he left me? What if he could never forgive me for the lie? I loved him so much and was terrified of losing him. As time went on, we visited my village more often, and even brought Samantha to the city. Sam treated her so well, and yet my heart ached because he still didn't know that Samantha was my daughter, not my younger sister. Watching them together, the guilt inside me grew stronger. Samantha had also grown fond of Sam. I could see how happy she was to be with him, how she finally had someone who resembled the father figure she had longed for. I didn't know how much longer I could keep the truth hidden. It felt like the secret was about to explode, and I dreaded what would happen when it did. One evening, Sam told Samantha and me that he had a big surprise for us. When we arrived at the enormous mansion, my eyes widened in shock. What was this? Why had we come here? We got out of the car, and Sam turned to us with a wide smile on his face. "This is our new home. I bought it for us as a wedding gift," he said, pointing to the mansion. At that moment, Samantha jumped up with joy and excitement, shouting, "How wonderful, Mommy! We're going to live in such a big house." I was in shock as I looked at her and whispered, "Samantha?" Sam looked confused, first at me and then at my daughter. "What's going on here?" he asked quietly. I took a deep breath, trying to speak, but words came out jumbled. I couldn't explain why I had lied. I was in complete shock from what was happening. Sam kept looking from me to Samantha. "Get in the car," was all he said. The drive back was silent, and Samantha too became quiet, sensing the tension. At home, Sam silently went to his room, and Samantha and I went to bed, though sleep was impossible. All night, I kept thinking about what I should do now. In the morning, before sunrise, I packed my bag, woke up Samantha, and holding her hand tightly, quietly headed for the door. I hoped to leave before Sam woke up, too ashamed to look him in the eye. But just as I reached the door, I heard his voice behind me. "And where do you think you're going?" he asked. I froze, my heart racing wildly. I turned around, too scared to look him in the eyes. Tears started to roll down my cheeks. "I'm going back to the village," I whispered. A look of surprise crossed Sam's face. "To the village?" Just like that, without even explaining anything to me? At that moment, I managed to raise my eyes and look at him. "I thought you would be angry and leave me," I said. Sam approached Samantha, crouched down, and gently told her to go to her room and play. Then, he sat beside me on the couch, waiting for me to speak. I took a deep breath and began my story. It was a simple, almost cliched tale, how an older man and a young, naive, romantic girl met, and the result of that meeting was an unexpected pregnancy. The man didn't want to take responsibility for the child and left, leaving the girl to figure out how to move forward with her life alone. I gave birth to Samantha, but in my village, it was considered disgraceful to have a child out of wedlock. People judged me harshly, and when she got older, I decided to leave in order to start over. I planned to return for her when the time was right, and that's how I ended up in the city, in Sam's house. I paused, wiping away my tears. Sam listened in silence, his brow furrowed and his gaze heavy. "What that man did is terrible," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "But there's something I need to tell you too." I looked at him in confusion, his face full of pain. "I've been hiding something from you too," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't have children. The doctor said that it would take a miracle for me to have kids." He paused, swallowing hard. "That's one of the reasons why Wanda left me." Tears welled up in Sam's eyes, and I felt my heart shatter with the pain he was carrying. "For me, the fact that the woman I love has a child, it's a miracle," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I want to be a good father to your daughter." I stood there, my chest overwhelmed with feelings. I couldn't believe it. My daughter was going to be our miracle. That Sam wasn't angry but happy about it. We got married and started raising my daughter together. 2 years later, I found out I was pregnant. When the doctor gave me the results, I was in shock. I was pregnant with Sam's child. It was yet another miracle that had happened to us. When I told Sam, I saw the happiest man in the world. He picked me up and twirled me around. Throughout my pregnancy, Sam took care of me, and on the day of the birth, he was right by my side. When our son was born and we looked at him, I realized that life is full of opportunities for miracles, and that miracles do happen if you believe and love. This is the end of my difficult but happy story. May your life be full of joy and limitless possibilities. Thanks for watching. Be sure to share your opinion, and don't forget to write a comment. Subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.